And then the elves got split, and the great nation of Aen Elle was divided, and the Shade, the people of the mountains, stood to the left, and the Aen Elle appeared to the right, the people of the alders. Some brought peace and knowledge, and the others brought fire and death. Those who brought peace were later met by fire, and those who carried the fire got drowned in blood. Unicorns stood in their way, and then there was a war, and then there was frost, white frost. The history of the world of The Witcher is incredible and multifaceted. It is full of beautiful plots and deep stories. It touches our real narratives and intertwines with them. It echoes in our heart with the noise of legendary battles, the trembling of hearts in love, the anger of bloodshed, and the flow of incredible magic. That is why the history of the world of The Witcher is so fascinating, and that's why we talk about it on our channel. In the first part of the history of the world of Neverland, we began with the birth of the universe and the development of the first sentient races. Today we will continue our story and touch on a number of important topics: the split of the elves, the war with unicorns, the culprits of conjugation of the spheres, the elder blood, the white frost, the winter queen, the wild hunt. So many things to talk about, and all this is in today's video, in unchanged chronological sequence. They split, Aen Elle and Aen Shade. After the elves found themselves in the world of Neverland, conquered some territories and cities, they established themselves as the dominant race of the world. After that, they could live in their power for many years, rule over various gnomes, dwarves, or even Vrans still remaining in some parts of the world. However, they were not interested in this. They wanted more, and especially the young ones wanted more. Not much time has passed, but a new generation grew up among the elves, proud, wayward, and depraved. That which had never seen the native world, had never seen the white frost, and dreamed of the greatness of travelers between worlds. Having become the ruling race of Neverland, they perceived themselves only as being better, smarter, stronger than others, and they wanted to expand the space for domination. The gates between the worlds still remained at their disposal. The great gate of Auberon was open, and thus the way to other planets remained free. The young elves tried to convince the elders that the people of Aen Elle should continue their expansion. However, more experienced elves disagreed with them. They were the generation that still remembered the cataclysm of the white frost, that was still grateful to the unicorns for salvation. That generation was glad for the peace and tranquility that the elves had gained in the lands of Neverland. That generation did not want more wars, because it had had enough of confrontation with the Vrans. That generation was eager to arrange life on the continent. And between those two layers of elves, between these aspirations, on the one hand for peace and development, on the other for domination and greatness, between these two ideologies and their supporters, irreconcilable disputes arose. It was then that the single nation of Aen Elle ceased to exist. The great split took place. In place of Aen Elle arose Aen Elle and Aen Shade. Aen Elle, the people of alders, if translated from Elven, gathered in its ranks mostly young elves who sought greatness and new challenges. Their leader was a powerful warrior and charismatic commander named Auberon Myrkitag. Tall, handsome, proud. His speeches ignited the hearts of the elves, instilled in their brains a thirst for challenge. His supporters gave Auberon the title of Elder King and were ready to do anything for him. Another part of the elves called themselves Aen Shade, the people of the mountains. Most of the Aen Shade included elven clans who were level-headed in their views. Their leader was a sage of ancient lineage named Simlis Finabe de Bear. His young daughter Francesca, surprisingly, also stayed with her father, although she did share some of Auberon's views. In any case, the split happened. Auberon scoffed at the speeches of the old elven sages, who urged the young elves not to do foolish things, and left them in their much-desired peace. Auberon led his new subjects, the new people of Aen Elle, through the gates of Auberon to new horizons. Many of the most talented wizards and warriors of the Elven nation followed him: Avallac'h, Gales, Imlerith. Those were respected names among the people of Aen Elle, and they all followed Auberon, identifying him as their leader. When the last of the elves of Aen Elle, aboard the white ships, disappeared at the gates of Auberon on their way to the new worlds, the split was irrevocably finished. The Aen Shade remained in Neverland. The Aen Elle began to conquer new horizons. The world of Aen Elle, enslavement of humans. Traveling between worlds came easily to the humans of Aen Elle. The unicorn portal worked fine, and the elves could choose a world to populate, and they found it quite quickly. A pleasant planet from a climatic point of view, not filled with any monsters or magical creatures, a beautiful and quiet place, a place which, however, was already inhabited. The spaces in the new world were inhabited by humans. The Aen Elle arrived in the new world on the same white ships that the Onondaga used to travel to Neverland, on white ships carrying Black Death. Hot-headed, they even tried to negotiate with humans, immediately speaking to them in the language of ultimatums and death. When the humans did not surrender to them immediately and voluntarily, when they did not recognize them as their gods, the Elves of Aen Elle began to use their power without hesitation. They unleashed a war and very quickly defeated humans who were at a low level of development, did not possess either magic or any significant scientific achievements. The elves slaughtered entire settlements of humans, leaving behind them burning fires and large piles of corpses, which over time turned into piles of skeletons on the ground. Elves conquered humans, and under the threat of complete extermination of the entire race, humans, in order to somehow survive, accepted the role of slaves. They were forced to serve their punishers. They were afraid to raise their eyes. They were born and died in the status of slaves, became the labor force and the object of providing comfort for the Elves of Aen Elle. They became almost cattle. This is how the elves committed the genocide of humans in the New World. And they would get away with it, and maybe they, fed up with this blood, would set out to conquer other worlds under the guidance of their unchanging leader, King Auberon. However, one big and even insurmountable obstacle suddenly appeared in their way. Unicorns stood in the way of Aen Elle's army. The Great War with Unicorns. Unicorns loved the world Aen Elle came into. They often visited it because over there time passed at a special, much faster pace than in other worlds. For example, if a year passed on that planet, then approximately 5-10 years passed in Neverland. A colossal difference. Unicorns loved the rivers of time, loved their changing flow, and therefore did not leave this world unattended. By the way, we spoke about unicorns in more details in the first part of the History of the Witcher universe. Feel free to follow the link and watch the video. Anyways, the unicorns should have heard Aen Elle's intervention, but it happened differently. The attack was too swift. The destruction of humans was lightning fast, so the unicorns did not have time to save the human race from enslavement. This world was now ruled by another race, ruled by proud Aen Elle. They called this world their own. Everyone had to glorify the planet as the world of Aen Elle. Unicorns were horrified by mountains of corpses, horrified by slavery and cruelty. They were shocked by what they saw, and they understood that they were also involved in this genocide, because it was them who once saved the elves from extinction, and it was them who gave the elves access to the Great Gate of Ardgath, and therefore gave them the opportunity to enter this world, to come with war to a world where normal human civilization was developing so peacefully and calmly. Unicorns were part of the universal order, cosmic beings beyond time and space, and they led to chaos and genocide. It was unbelievable, but it happened, and it was necessary to fix it, due to the fact that the elves did not want to hear anything about repentance or recognition of their crimes. There was only one way out: war. War between elves and unicorns. We don't know too much about that war. We do not know the details of specific battles or descriptions of specific military exploits and crimes. However, we do have a general picture that allows us to draw a chronology through these times hidden in the bloody fog. We know that the war was long and took many lives. We know that the elves killed unicorns, those that until recent times seemed like divine creatures. Auberon led the elves forward, and he radiated such power that no one dared to contradict him. We know that it was in these battles that the swords and characters of the fiercest and mightiest warriors of Aen Elle were hardened. We know that no matter what, in the end, Aen Elle were defeated. Yes, the people of the elves persevered, and were able to keep part of the world of Aen Elle in their possession. But the defeat was different. This defeat destroyed the ambitions and took away the future from the elves. Ardgarad, the Great Barrier. But let's talk about step by step. The war was long and exhausting. However, while the unicorns drew resources directly from space and the Great Spiral, the elves got exhausted quickly. On the new planet, there was not even a fraction of the resources they needed. the elves died, and the young generation grew up for a very long time and for the most part did not match the greatness of the old squad, Auberon, Gales, and others. In the end, when the people of the elves were on the verge of complete defeat, Auberon decided to make a desperate action. He gathered together all the most powerful elven sorcerers to create a single spell of incredible power. It was the Ard-Garret sorcery on the highest level, the magic of the Great Barrier. In essence, the elves of Aen Elle had separated the part of their world that they still controlled from the rest of the planet. Ard-Garret was a huge invisible impenetrable dome that even unicorns were unable to overcome. The incredible power of the spell, which this universe had not yet known. It put an end to the war, because Aen Elle and the unicorns simply had no chance to wage any kind of conflict now. However, this spell had catastrophic consequences for the entire world order. The beginning of the conjunction of the spheres. The magic of Ard-Garret destroyed all the foundations of the world order, shook the very essence of magic, and even affected the Great Spiral. The spheres of the Great Spiral began to move for the first time since the formation of the universe. Each of the worlds felt the consequences of what happened, because in response to the incredible power of the spell, a cataclysm on a colossal scale has begun. The conjunction of the spheres began. No permanent portals between worlds worked anymore. The roads of the Great Spiral got changed, and even the Great Gate of Ard-Gate was completely destroyed. Instead, the conjunction of the spheres brought all these roads into chaos. The lines between the worlds became incredibly thin, and elsewhere they disappeared in chaotic order. Monsters and living creatures from one planet ended up on other planets, in other worlds, absolutely chaotically. For example, the world of Enshea, the world of Neverland, was overrun by various vampires, demons, creepy monsters, and humans. We will talk about that later. Now, let's get back to Aen Elle and their history. Because the war was over, a truce was made between elves and unicorns. But at the same time, the gates of Ard-Gate collapsed. All the other roads between the worlds that the elven sages had known about before were destroyed. In fact, the price of ending the insane war for Aen Elle was that their people found themselves locked in their own world, unable to move towards new horizons and new conquests. That is, striving from the very beginning for these very new horizons under the guidance of Auberon. The elves achieved the exact opposite. Yes, under the protection of the barrier of Ard-Garret, their life was not hellish. Aen Elle possessed sufficient territory, but the desire for conquest, pride and awareness of their uniqueness by others, all this remained with the elves, and there were no more opportunities. The threat of the White Frost. For a while, they were forced to settle down and come to terms. Their ruler continued to be Auberon. Avallac'h and Gales became his closest advisors and henchmen. In recognition of this, all three wore special bracers. Auberon wore gold bracers, Avallac'h and Gales had bracers of steel. With the help of their magic, life in different cities managed to improve. The capital of the Elven lands in the New World of Tir Nalia has generally become one of the most beautiful places this universe has ever seen. The slave labor of subjugated humans also helped establish a comfortable life for Aen Elle. It would seem, well, the elves were deprived of the ability to travel between worlds and conquer, but they can arrange a beautiful life at least in this world, at least for themselves. However, all hopes were broken very quickly, because the evil doom overtook the elves. The same cataclysm came to the world of Aen Elle. The White Frost had come. It seemed incredible. However, yes, White Frost again. Death once again. But this time, the unicorns would not come to the rescue. This time, unicorns were the enemy, and the conjunction of the spheres had destroyed all the established roads between worlds. Was the fate of the people of Aen Elle extinction? Extinction as punishment for their sins? Sounds like an epic story, but in our case, no one was going to give up without a fight. In the world of Aen Elle, the progress of the White Frost appeared to be slower than it had once been on the planet of Aen Elle. That is why Elven sorcerers, or sages, were able to withstand the terrible cataclysm. They did not have the strength to stop the White Frost completely, but they could slow its flow. Slow it down to buy some time, years, decades, maybe centuries, in order to find a way out of the situation. This work was undertaken by Gales, one of Auberon's closest supporters, but Avallac'h, he had to find a way out of the situation, develop a weapon against the White Frost, an incredible task. However, Avallac'h surprisingly managed to deal with it. Avallac'h and the Elder Blood Project. Through complex research, experiments and genetic tests, Avallac'h understood that there was only one way out of the situation: to escape from the freezing world to another planet. For this, he needed someone who could travel between worlds on his own instead of unicorns, who could recreate the great gates of Ardgaith. And this someone could only be an exceptional being, the perfect elf, someone who would possess the power of the entire elf race from birth. This someone couldn't be born by accident. This special someone, like a guinea pig, was supposed to be born only in conditions closer to laboratory ones. Avallac'h understood that in order for such a powerful elf, the only unchosen child, to appear in the world, he should bring together only the most powerful and most significant persons of the elf race, so that they could get their genes combined to awaken something more from elven blood, something ancient, primordial, perfect, so that the elven blood would give rise to the elder blood. Only a child of this elder blood, a perfect blend of elven genes, only such a child would be able to rediscover Ardgaith. It will be able to open the gate between the worlds. Avallac'h brought his idea of the elder blood to Geralt and Auberon. Both great Aen Elle agreed that this was the only option to survive. Thus, the great experiment of the elder blood was begun, an experiment whose fruits will determine the fate of states, peoples, and entire worlds. Avallac'h became responsible for this experiment, while Geralt restrained the White Frost and Auberon ruled the state, and Avallac'h took up his work with full responsibility. He studied the ancient elven bloodlines, took blood samples from them, and then selected for certain elves the perfect match, the ones whose genes were best suited for the experiment to awaken the ancient elder essence in the elven blood. Then these couples had to give birth to offsprings, and Avallac'h waited for the children to grow up and placed these children with other ideal pairings for them. As a result of all these pairings, the only chosen child was to be born in the end. A child who would fear no boundaries, who could travel between worlds with ease, who possessed the same power as unicorns, and who would once again create the Great Gate of Ardgaith. Thus, for example, Avallac'h brought out Caranthir, an incredibly talented child with golden eyes. Over the centuries, he traced the ancestors of Caranthir, his great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, and parents as well. Also, that Caranthir was born as a result. Caranthir's blood came out as the Elder One only by a small fraction. However, even this small amount of Elder blood allowed Caranthir to do incredible things. He could not open the Great Gate of Ardgaith, but he understood the structure of the Great Spiral better than anyone else, and therefore he could penetrate into other worlds, could open small portals for a while for himself and his associates. An incredible achievement, an incredible power. But Caranthir had only a fraction of Elder blood in his veins. The main experiment concerned the most powerful and ancient bloodline of Aen Elle, the bloodline of King Auberon. So after a long research, Avallac'h decided to marry Auberon with an elf of another ancient family of the sages, also known as Aen Severn, named Sheadal. This marriage was happy. Auberon loved Sheadal a lot, who became the only elf in the whole world which could console and calm the great supreme leader. Auberon and Sheadal eventually had a child, the girl that they named Lara. Then the royal family was happy, and Avallac'h began researching who to mate Lara with so that a true Elder Blood child would be born. Little did anyone know that the worlds of the Great Spiral would know this girl's name. They would know her as Lara Dorren, and many would curse that name, and Avallac'h himself would experience something for the first time, similar to true love. But that will happen later. We are still far from that time. So let's return to reality, because so many interesting events were happening at the same time. The Wild Hunt, Winter Queen, Eredin, Imlerith, and Caranthir. For example, a military structure was being created, which numerous worlds will mark as the Wild Hunt, Dierg Ruadri. The fact is that, on the one hand, in anticipation of the future resettlement from this world, Auberon needed an army again. Also, the number of human slaves among the elves significantly decreased. It turned out that humans reproduced and developed very poorly in captivity. Therefore, a military force was needed to capture new humans. Thus, by creating a special military unit, Auberon solved two extremely important tasks for the present and the future. The first leader of the Wild Hunt was the Winter Queen. You ask, who is the Winter Queen? And I will answer, she's the one who already carried a part of the Elder Blood gene, one of the most ancient sages of the Elder people, It was said that she still remembered her Aen Elle homeworld and ran away from there. Her blood was not diluted with almost anything. Almost primordial elven blood flowed in her veins. She refused to participate in Avallac'h's experiment because she was not going to run away from the White Frost for a second time. She decided to overcome it herself, and one day she headed straight into a snow-white blizzard to the very heart of the cataclysm. She was gone for a long time, but one day the elven sage returned. She returned and no one recognized her anymore. She had changed. Her skin turned deathly white, her eyes lost their pupils, and her voice became harsh and icy. At the same time, power pulsed around her. The Elderblood protected the sage from death, and for this she absorbed part of the power of the White Frost. So the Winter Queen became half-elf, half-elemental of the White Frost. She could not overcome the cataclysm, but she mastered a part of its power. She returned to Aen Elle, and as she had become a completely different being, something had to be done with her. Auberon, having assessed everything, chose her as the leader of the Wild Hunt. The Winter Queen was the name given to her by the others, because she was no longer an ordinary elf. The Elderblood helped her, together with the riders of the newly created Wild Hunt, to penetrate into the other worlds for a short time. Especially often, this squad visited Neverland, where it kidnapped humans. We will talk about where humans came from to Neverland a bit later, and for now, we will finish with the Wild Hunt. The Winter Queen became the first navigator of the Wild Hunt, the person who opens the gates to other worlds for the Red Riders. The position of the navigator of the Wild Hunt was created and immediately became one of the highest in the Aen Elle hierarchy. The Winter Queen herself was cold and emotionless. She loved the snowy deserts more than anything in reality, because the White Frost was part of her. She also possessed magic that made it easier to catch humans. She scattered small enchanted pieces of ice. If such a piece entered a person's eye or heart, then the person was doomed to eternal service to the Winter Queen and the Aen Elle. The Winter Queen ruled the Wild Hunt for a long time, until one day, under unknown circumstances, she simply disappeared. Where and how exactly, no one knows. Some said that she was finally taken in completely by the White Frost. Others nodded at King Auberon, who felt that this cold, powerful being was a threat to his power and somehow removed it from existence. Doesn't matter. In any case, the new commander of the Wild Hunt was a great warrior named Eredin Glass, and the functions of the navigator of the Wild Hunt, who would open the gates to new worlds and would allow the army of Red Riders, at least in the form of spirits, to penetrate into the world of Neverland or anywhere else, became Caranthir's one. Eredin had been known for his cruelty and skill ever since the war against the unicorns. They even dubbed Eredin as Sparrowhawk for his predatory nature. And Caranthir showed great promise, learned very well from Avallac'h, and was the symbol of Aen Elle's will, the first truly successful outcome of the Elderblood experiment. As we said earlier, Avallac'h produced a child named Caranthir almost artificially. The main thing was that Auberon was 100% sure of the loyalty and devotion of both Caranthir and Eredin. He was also sure of the strength of the Wild Hunt for the future wars, because the ranks of this army included legendary veterans of the war with unicorns, such as Imlerith and Nithral. So this was the situation for the Elves of Aen Elle. These people had a purpose once again. There was a plan. There was strength and determination to do everything, to survive and become great. There was King Auberon with his loving wife Sheadal, a beautiful daughter named Lara, who was supposed to continue the bloodline. With the help of scientific research, Avallac'h would match Lara Darren with the perfect match. And thus, the experiment of the Elderblood, the experiment of breeding the only chosen child, would continue, and in time would be brought to an end. All this time, Gales and his subordinates held back the White Frost, which was advancing on the world of Aen Elle from all sides, absorbed villages, cities, and provinces. At the same time, the Wild Hunt under the leadership of the Winter Queen and then Eredin with Caranthir gained strength. This army was becoming more and more powerful, infiltrating different worlds, stealing slaves from there, honing their skills and preparing to conquer entire continents the moment Avallac'h finally would finish his experiment and bring forth the promised child of the Elderblood, the child. A great plan, a plan of colossal, even cosmic ambitions, a plan that, however, was not destined to come true. But why? What led him to this failure? How could the mighty Aen Elle fail to bring the Elderblood experiment to a controlled end? We will find the answers to all these questions in Neverland. Yes, exactly in that Neverland in which the other part of the Elves remained, in which the Unshaped Elves remained. We will learn about what happened there, how events developed in parallel with what was happening in the world of Aen Elle, and how in the end everything ended in the next issues of our History of the Witcher universe. Well, writing this part of the world's history was no easy task. All the information had to be collected literally piece by piece. But then it's only more interesting, because we finally returned to Neverland again. Incredible key events are just about to begin there. The conjunction of the spheres, the arrival of humans, wars, genocide, the creation of Witchers. So many things. Subscribe to the channel, put a like and click the bell so you don't miss the next video. It will be very important for understanding the further history of the Witcher universe. Write in the comments how you liked this video and whether you, dear viewer, want more content. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end.